Thank you. I'd like to begin today by telling you about what I think. I think that people undervalue their potential for changing systems, especially on a local level. And that's ironic, because your personal activism is in fact most powerful to those to whom you are closest. I believe that the personal is political, that real activism is not limited to a hashtag or formalized registered groups. I think the most effective activism is organic, and it is really about the relationships that you build. If there is one thing that I know for sure, it is that each and every person in this room holds tremendous power if you choose to wield it. Now, sometimes people think the word activist has negative connotation, but all it really means is that you are involved in your community and you are advocating for issues that you care about. It is easy to feel powerless, but that feeling is not the truth. And what of apathy and disillusionment? Roxane Gay is an LGBTQ author and advocate whom I deeply admire. And she said that if you remain disillusioned or apathetic in this climate, you are complicit. You think your disillusionment is more important than the very dangers marginalized people live with, and nothing will change by sitting at home. Now, I'm here to tell you that you don't need to feel overwhelmed, nor do you need to feel like you have to fix everything. I'm going to give you two examples of activism. The first is an example of my own personal activism, and the second is how you can amplify someone else's message. Now, I was born and raised in Yellowknife in the Northwest Territories, and students in the NWT who wanted to attend post-secondary had to leave, and they could not access Canada's student loans. We had instead a homegrown option through the territorial government. And back in the mid-90s, what we got was $2,600 and 2 plane tickets to Edmonton. That $2,600 was all we could access for post-secondary education. It was not indexed to inflation, nor was it keeping track with the extraordinary soaring costs of post-secondary schooling. Now remember, when you're from the Northwest Territories at that time, there was essentially no post-secondary, so you had to leave. So you would have to pay for rent, for groceries, for furniture, for transportation to school. And that dollar figure that we got in the mid-90s hadn't been changed since about 1986. So I was frustrated, but I didn't know what to do. So when I came home from school that summer, I put an ad in the newspaper in the classified section. And I said, do you want more money for post-secondary? Well, come to a meeting at the library. And to my surprise, dozens and dozens of students showed up. And they were also frustrated. And some of them were in a situation where they had, in fact, had to drop out of school because they just couldn't access money and they had no other means of being able to continue their education. So we started strategizing. People came to my house and we formed a plan. We decided we would give interviews to the newspaper, to the radio, that we'd write letters to our MLAs. But in the end, we didn't feel like we were being heard. We felt we were getting the brush off. So we went onto the internet, and this is at a time before there was even Google. And I'm not kidding when I say I think we found a GeoCities page with a checklist. And we decided to organize a protest. So we called it a rally, and we decided to invite all of the MLAs, and we held it on the front steps of the Legislative Assembly. And we served them lunch, craft dinner, and watered-down iced tea. And when we got our turn at the mic, we said, this is a thank you rally. We want to say, thanks for nothing. You're not doing enough to help us. And guess what? The next year, they changed the funding levels. They essentially doubled our grant, they tripled our book allowance, and they made our loan portion a lot closer to the reality of Southern rental costs. But they didn't allow students who were already in the system to get the new funding. So people like myself and the other students who had worked so hard to advocate for this were excluded. So sometimes you fight and you don't win. Sometimes it's a partial victory. But fighting for what you believe in isn't always about personal benefit. Others pay dues for you, and sometimes you will pay dues for others. Now, I want to give you an example of how your activism can be used as that of an ally. I used to work with a woman as a prosecutor, and I would call her a friend. Her name was Kelly Ma. She had a young child, and she was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. Her prognosis was grim, and she needed a drug called Tykerb that cost $6,000 a month that the province would not cover. Kelly had 2 bad options in front of her. She could forego the drug, or she could bankrupt her family. She decided to instead fight the government and try to get the drug covered. Now, to be very clear, Kelly led this battle. But I knew Kelly, and I had always admired her. She was a very kind prosecutor to juniors in the office, and she always brought fabulous purses to court. And I wanted to help her, so I called her up and I asked her, "What can I do?" And she said, "Well, you can write a letter." So I wrote a letter. But I also used my personal network, and I asked every friend I had to also write a letter. I was also involved with a group called Assist, which is the Law Society's nonprofit that is concerned with the mental health of lawyers. And I had met a man through Assist who belonged to a support group for older male lawyers who were in solo practices who had received cancer diagnoses. And I called him, and I asked him to write a letter. And I asked him to ask every person that they had ever supported to also write a letter. And in the end, the province started covering that drug, and that was Kelly's legacy, even though it sadly came too late for her. The power of all of these people writing letters amplified Kelly's message, and it showed how being an ally to something that you believe in can effect change. I believe that ordinary people are the ones who effect real change. You can organize to achieve the things you want in this life, whether that is having a stop sign installed on your street or ensuring that every person who lives in your country has universal health care. You will not win all the time, but the point is to keep at it. Eventually, you will get there. Dramatic shifts in society did not happen overnight. Look at how far women have come in 100 years, and look at how much more there is to achieve. Never despair. There is always something you can do. You can write a letter. You can make a phone call. You can attend a rally. You can vote. You could even run for elected office. When it comes to changing the world, all you need is relentless persistence. And a few friends always helps. I will end on this note. Margaret Mead famously said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." Thank you.